Is that on? Yes. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't worry, I'm not doing karaoke. So, I don't know who, Thomas, do you remember who suggested the code challenge stuff to start with? Or was it from the board? Who was the first one who suggested the code challenge? It wasn't me.
I don't
Probably
know.
Nathan. Anyway, the idea of this is to do something similar to Google Summer of Code and Outreachy and other new initiative projects, but do it within the DPDK. And the reason for having these is to try to get new developers, new features, and to generally show project activity. So with that, what I thought I'd do is try to structure this with rather than diving into all the details of what a code challenge is and how we would do it, we'll leave that up to the board and other things to resolve. I'd like to get some good basic ideas of a brainstorming session of what things people would like to see, collect those things, then we can go back as the tech board, sort down to like 10 or so, put those out, get a little more feedback, and then we'll present that up to the governing board to say, here's what we want to have people work on. And I've already heard from Nathan that we can get some amount of funds to pay people for doing this. And I put down to him today to put it at about the same level at what Google Summer of Code does to pay people for their 12-week effort. So this isn't, I mean, it's volunteers in terms of volunteers, but it's not, we're not asking for unpaid intern level of open source work. I don't think that's fair. And the other thing to frame the brainstorming session is we obviously want it bigger than a bread box. Like, I don't want to be asking somebody to do spelling check feature fixes, but it can't be so large an initiative that there's no way that somebody could complete it without a whole hardware vendor behind, in which case they might as well be funded by the hardware vendor. So I just want to keep it contained. It can be small, medium, or large. It doesn't have to be that way. And it can be anything from internal to external projects, core integration, or something new that somebody would love to see. So I'd rather than me talking about, I'd like to hear any suggestions people have of things that they would like to see. And also I'd like somebody to be the volunteer to collect the list, because I have a hard time writing and talking at the same time. So can I get Bruce or, okay, we have a volunteer back there. So just to seed it, I would like to say the things I thought of as areas is we could always use more work on tools if somebody has any tools ideas. I was just looking today at something and there's tons of hardening tools and hardening ideas that could be done to make our software more robust. I'm sure people can come up with new apps for DPDK that could be in the examples. And as you saw with the flow stuff, the flow has got, flow support is one of DPDK's unique features, but always can be expanded and grown. So, there we go.
Yeah, I don't know if we're allowed to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yesterday there were talks about how can we improve the review process and patch triaging. I remember you talking about applying, feeding some AI-based tool with the whole history of DPDK contributions and the outcome of whether a patch was applied or not, and try to give a hint on incoming new patches. And it's not related to DPDK code base exactly, but still it seems like a good...
I've seen projects like that. For example, one that we showed up on, I don't know if you're familiar with Sasha Levin and kernel.org. What they did was they went and did a kind of large language model against the whole, machine learning against the whole of kernel.org LKML mailing list, which is so huge. And what they did was they were looking for patches that ought to be in the stable tree that weren't marked as stable because there was such a volume of patches that the tool could easily spit out, well, this looks like a bug fix. It says it's a bug fix, even though this and this. Maybe it should be in stable. So the same thing with us. I think we could go through the mailing list and get some idea of.
Yeah. And about Flow API, was there ever a discussion about writing a software implementation of RT-Flow, which could serve
There
as
has
a
been mentioned
reference?
it many times that people would like one, and nobody stood up to do it. And one of the ones I thought of is why not have a translator between RT-Flow and a BPF backend.
So we want participants in the code challenge. If you propose a task so big as writing an RT-Flow implementation, maybe you will discourage everybody. I know.
Well, yeah, with each of these things, we'd have to define the bounded scope for, what we'll reward you for. But something like that, doing a whole...
It doesn't have to be complete, but at least a start.
So the question is, how do you split the work for many participants? Yeah, but it's a good proposal.
I guess another idea, not related to RT-Flow. UNH presented earlier where they're now spitting out code coverage numbers for some of our testing. Might actually be something that we could bound and say like, okay, here's what we're currently at for numbers in these modules, and improve module X, by adding some tests that cover these lines, that lines, whatever.
Well, even if you could get it so automated at the point, just like you say Ninja build doc, you say Ninja build code coverage, run it, and you get your...
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can get those numbers actually out of Meson. Like it will you can just give it an option. It will spit that stuff out. So,
yeah.
But it gives us something we can measure.
Yeah. The other one I was looking at today was it turns out there's a whole bunch of compiler attributes that various tools will turn on to say you must check the result of this function, you must check the result of that function. Just hardening down that, like if you ever built anything with Fortify turned on and whatever, it will complain to you about, oh yeah, you're probably mem copying past the end of something over here. There's a bunch of other tools like that. To somebody to go and investigate and fix a bunch of things would really be helpful. And that's one of those ones that could be expanded from small to big based on somebody's time availability.
Well, as another idea, there is attempt to get rid of variable length array, right? To support MCVS, and right now what we're doing is pretty much what I don't like. We're just replacing it with allocate, but probably at least for some cases, there is more smart ideas, right? Yeah. So again, what I think is usable in this case, this task could be subdivided into into modules. Get rid of delay for this library, then for that library, and so on, so on, so on, kind of. That sort of thing. That's basically it. Yeah. Get rid of it, same as Linux does, right? We discussed it on one of the text boards, and we decided that that's the way we should go, right? So as I remember correctly, yeah.
Plus one.
That sort of reminds me that I don't know what shape it's in, but the Windows port of DPDK was the motivation for a lot of this, and it seems to be slowly rolling along. Do we need to put a stake in the ground? Can you get TestPMD running on Windows?
Yeah, but right now, looking at the patch that Windows guy provided, obviously, right now they're doing only the parts they're interested in, right? That they plan to run in a first stage or whatever, right? While there is plenty of libraries that still do use kind of this sort of thing, right?
Okay, so we gave ideas about some core libraries, change, etc. But it can also be something about tooling or anything around DPDK. If there are some ideas here.
I had a couple other ideas. One was Groot made me think of can we do a graph-based bridge, a learning bridge, because a lot of people still use L2, and as one of the people that was the former Linux bridge maintainer, I can tell you that there's a surprising number of people that run it. And I know Open vSwitch is much more capable, but to being able to demonstrate just an L2 bridge in DPDK as a real application would probably be something people could do.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, what we are looking for are tasks not too big, and if possible, we want metrics like growth is a good example because we can add many nodes. So the metric is how many nodes did you add? And then you get rewarded.
We're asking for somebody to get something started right, not complete it to the end degree. I look at it, if you were to look at the best would be somebody who could do the equivalent of a graduate level work over a summer, not.
But I haven't. So is the work supposed to be like a mentor or?
So if you're familiar with Google Summer of Code, what they do is they come up with a list. They get companies to apply. They approve the list. Google is funding this, so they have a set of people that are the mentors assigned for each one of those projects. People make applications. They join the application person to the project, or somebody says, I want to do this. They choose the person, and then that person has a mentor, and then that person works with that mentor, and there's a couple check-ins, and at the end, the stipend is broken down into start, middle, and end, just like you would do with a contractor in your house, right? And so they've got it down. It's very well organized, but the problem, as for DPDK, is there's so many projects that wanted to use it because it's basically free money from Google that there's no way that we would get anything near what we want out of it. I'm not picking on them. It's just it's too popular.
The reality is that it's very difficult to allocate some time to this extra initiative, but what we have some money, so we have a budget. So we can give rewards to participants. Of course, as any contributor, they will be kind of mentored, but we cannot, it's not educational really.
Just to give you an idea, I did look up in this public what the stipend schedule for Google Summer of Code is. They break it down by geography and size of project. And so for a small one, it was $1,500 US. And for a large one, it was $6,000 spread over a 12-week period. So that we're not talking wildly. It's not not peanuts, but it's not a wildly expensive situation. We're not asking for free. And I would think we'd work with the governing board to be in the same ballpark.
DPDK generally these days is not deployed in a monolith like this on a platform. There are multiple DPDK applications, and modern deployment patterns, they come and go. And then as normal, I think that the current command line and environment library restricts that pattern. And so an idea that I have is to switch to using essentially a configuration file for a platform, because most of the entities are known at a administration level, and an independent resource discovery mechanism, so that the rest of DPDK can function as normal. But a lot of these parameters and hardware details that people have to put in the command line and manage, often in real time, and get wrong, it can be avoided. And it makes probably DPDK a lot more friendly to use.
We've had to do that twice already.
Okay.
But not in the DPDK project. In other projects we had that. We ended up building the DPDK command line from that resource and feeding it in.
Yeah, so
Which is sort of counterintuitive and doesn't really helpful to any newcomers at all. So you're right.
yeah, that's an idea.
It kind of brings up the other thing, which kind of goes back to all the talk about cores and all that other stuff earlier today. It would be great if somebody could figure out a way to make things more dynamic and, dynamic packet scheduling, basically, at some level. I know that's probably almost hardware-based, but the way it's static right now, it's kind of makes life hard.
I like the angle of Martin to make DPDK more friendly. We can also imagine having some side application. For instance, let's imagine some graphical application to discover things or to prepare a command line or I don't know what. But we can improve the DPDK experience even without any clue about how DPDK is working. We can open the code challenge to people doing graphical application, web application, this kind of thing, if it improves the user experience.
That's a really good idea because I've been playing around with little computers and applications, and pretty much all these ones have really cool like web apps or even a phone app that you can go look at what's going on. Which also brings up the other one, which is basically because where the money isn't coming into DPDK, we always tend to look at the high end. It would be really cool to be able to have modern hardware is enough to run DPDK. I mean, you can run DPDK on a Raspberry Pi. If there was some way to make that available and easy and, even put it in schools. I played with it. The problem is more the hardware drivers aren't quite there the way you want, but that's solvable.
So just to clarify your question, do you mean to say that we should look at building these applications using DPDK? Is that what you mean? Like a web application or something?
What I mean is that if someone is coming with a new application to help configuring DPDK or to help to start DPDK, just this kind of thing, or maybe to help discovering what are the resources, how to configure them, it's not the core of DPDK, but it helps the user experience. So it can be rewarded in a code challenge, isn't it? Does it deserve a reward? Yeah? So if you're thinking about any crazy idea, that's the right time to propose it, and maybe someone will implement it. Be crazy.
There's a question on Zoom around making. Just there's a comment or question on Zoom around making it easy for porting existing apps that are not built on DPDK, that are built on kernel sockets, getting those ported over to DPDK. Or making it easier to do so.
Yep.
Well, one that was stuck on our list from a long time ago, and I barely remember what we were talking about at the time, but was we always had can we make DPDK interfaces look like Linux kernel interfaces as much as possible to the users? So having a real netlink listener that's doing something useful, having I did the work to make packet capture better, but I think we could even expand it to somebody went and worked with the PCAP library folks to make it know about DPDK interfaces, so you could just make Wireshark work out of the box. The DPDK people would be perfectly willing to put it under the code challenge. So it doesn't have to be in the DPDK code base to be part of this challenge. Do what? Oh, Scapy. Yeah, same thing.
Skype with DPDK, that was an interesting one. And
Though a lot of these times, though, when you work with another project, you need somebody or some way to make it stick, because a lot of times somebody will do something for another project, and unless it gets accepted over there or there's a maintainer around, it sort of rots and goes away. So, but
I'm not saying it's easy, right?
I'm not trying to criticize them, but yeah, it'd be great to have it.
Yeah, nothing crazy, but would like to see WireGuard on Grout. WireGuard, the yeah.
WireGuard Grout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm willing to also say that if Grout wants to take and have some items in there, we can put them in for the list of projects. It doesn't have to be just DPDK core.
So getting back to user experiences and that, setting up VFIO and switching in the appropriate modules and advertising those, having a way to automate that perhaps through systemd, and so that's repeatable and it's very easy to do would be huge, I think.
I don't know if you're aware of driver CTL. That's a tool with which you can set
There's a few Python tools that.
Now this one is actually it's in Red Hat and it's in other distros as well.
Yeah, I think it's on Ubuntu as well.
Yeah.
So it's just a shell script where you set override PCI ID and driver, and it creates a systemd service which will automatically rebind whatever device you set to whatever driver you set.
Yeah, I would prefer to see something that had like a JSON file that actually then was in a central place that was fed in, and something other than script and Python being used as the languages. But that's at least the idea. I forgot. It's people reading manuals and doing things by hand, and then trying to figure out how to translate that into something that can be maintained in production, and actually even being able to repeatedly do it by hand when they're first starting on DPDK.
Yeah, I think that he's bringing up a point that our scope right now is we have a high touch starting phase, and it's not really, at the other end, it's incomplete as well. So, if you go to, I can build and I can run test PMD. DPDK does an okay job now, but there's 10 steps at the start. There should be one. And then at the other end, to have a production-ready service is a lot more complete than what we do now with DPDK. Having gone through that effort, it's not trivial to set up a service, make it restartable, just like we were talking earlier, how Groot has a command line that talks to the service, all those kind of things.
It fundamentally needs to be not some assembly required, but something that most developers can then leverage. Mm-hmm. The other piece to that is to actually clean up so that a lot of the libraries are optional, and there's just a way to enable an even individual PMD environment for an application and not dictate the application's architecture, but fit into an application's either language framework or architecture, as opposed to actually being the architecture, right? I think that's another important thing to enable and help
Maybe
DPDK be adopted.
I mean, that brings up the language thing, brings up the two other endpoints we talked about or mentioned earlier, which is being able to integrate with, like, can you do a Rust application using DPDK with the toolkits that's there? And then if you want to go the other extreme, can somebody demo doing a Rust driver in DPDK and have it actually, and being complete in terms of not just giving a talk about having it here, but having it in the code base so that it's documented and reproducible for other people. I mean, an obvious place to look for a lot of these ideas is all the talks that never got past the stage one from previous summits.
So back to the comment was saying about Linux and the devices, pickups. I mean, there was something on Linux that was switch dev to allow to kind of have abstractions for some hardware switchings. And one switch dev application was first was Citizen was Rockers on QEMUs. So I think things like Groot kind of Groot backend in QEMUs that becomes kind of switch dev could be a kind of fancy application, because I mean, at least we get all the stacks. We create some new activities for switch dev, because currently I think it's kind of dead end if I'm not wrong. And so we get the benefits of Groot, we get the benefits of switch dev, and we try to create some fancies, some fancy layers.
Morten from Smart Chair Systems. So one of the things we're talking about in the tech board is making more fixed size parameters in DPDK runtime dynamic. So as a precursor to that, one project could be looking into DPDK which parameters affect performance or memory footprint or something. So the things that we target at making dynamic are the right things, like maximum number of queues, maximum number of CPU cores, other things that if we look into. So the task here is analyzing which things would have the most effect making dynamic.
Okay.
I think, Martin, you bring in a very good point here. Right. So what I have seen is DPDK kind of has grown into different areas, and one of the areas is embedded systems. We all talk about PCIe, steering tags, chiplets, but it has grown into embedded systems where there is 4 gig of memory. So I think it might be a good idea to have profiles within DPDK, wherein you say that, hey, here is an embedded profile, you configure DPDK with embedded profile, and you get certain fixed things, but it is most performant on the embedded platform, compared to a server platform where you need all kinds of flexibility, et cetera, and with the flexibility, you will lose some performance. So it's like the best of both worlds. So
We got a line of people, so.
If you were to look at an application like T-Rex, it has like the TUI where you get statistic updates and stuff. Why not have a dashboard, some kind of text-based dashboard for test PMD, for example, where when you run test PMD, you can include the dashboard and you can see in real time, you know, packet counts, byte counts, misses, you know, whatever information that's like valuable, rather than CLI, you know, show port stats all, show port stats all, to be able to have that kind of dashboard. I think even better would be a DPDK library that offers like a set of like simple text widgets that allows you to build any kind of dashboard you want. And
Or there's, your idea is great because there are like 6 other tools that do that outside of DPDK, like BMON and all these other ones. Can you take one of those tools, teach it about DPDK or teach it about test PMD? Right, but I'm saying that it's usually there's 2 parts of these problems. One is getting the data, and the other one is making it a nice application to present it. Yeah, it's not easy.
Yep. So one thing that I would suggest as a smaller task is a way to tell the build system, I'm going to run the application on a server that looks like this. So if I only have, say, an Intel E810 in my server, why am I compiling the drivers for everything else? And I think that should be a fairly reasonably scoped task for someone new coming in. I would also like to say that my talk tomorrow is partially a pitch for an idea that is probably a little larger than this, but there may be some projects under that umbrella if people are interested.
Sounds good.
You mean only for compilation, or do you want to ship a DPDK?
Yeah, so ideally, it would just sort of generate the Meson options for. I only have an Intel NIC, therefore I don't care about NXP's embedded things or things like that. And that would actually be very helpful for the community lab because we already do compile testing there. So compiling the same drivers over and over again when they're not going to be used for testing is a tax on the hardware.
Something a little bit different, just on the tool side. I'm thinking about something similar to like a chatbot that would ingest all of the documentation from DPDK and build some kind of a language model, have an interface that someone could write a prompt into that can help them with ABC without having to search through all the documentation.
That reminds me of we have an ongoing discussion. I'm sure you probably know that AI is now gold, right? So everybody wants AI. So the board, and we were like, how could you use AI with DPDK? And one of the ideas was, could we take telemetry to identify network anomalies? But that's something that's a lot of other companies are doing, which to my mind thinks there must be an open source project or some set of projects that people are doing it. Can we work to get integrated with it rather than, because if I was building such a project, I would have it work across the kernel and probably some other things. But, doing DPDK as well would be great. Oh, one other idea while he walks up is, as you were talking about SOCs, dealing with SOCs, one of the other things is DPDK has started to work on power, but it's not really done enough to be all that useful for actual customers. And if you're talking SOC, in my previous job at Microsoft, we had an embedded thing in the cloud, and if you think about how many servers they have, if you can save 5 watts per server, that's actually a significant global footprint. And Google the same way. So power matters, and if it was more complete and there was more, it could even just be having enough data to use the tools we have to make good recommendations.
So there's a lot of, I think it's quite well documented how to develop DPDK fast path applications. what are the libraries available, and so on. I don't think it's well documented how to interface with those fast path applications. So there's a lot of documentation, how to capture a packet, how to transmit a packet, how to look up in a table, and so on. But there's not really a lot of documentation about how to interface with between the control plane and the data plane. So a best practices document, when you you develop some fast path application, you probably generate some counters. What's the best practice for obtaining those counters and exposing them to the surrounding world? What's the best practice for updating tables? What's the best practice for aging out old entries in tables? Stuff like that. So in order to not provide a complete framework with all that and CLI and interfaces and control plane interfaces, so a document describing how to do this. What are the best practices?
Okay. Is everybody getting hungry and want to use their drink tickets up? Is that what I'm feeling?
Well, if we have run out of ideas, we have DTS. So please contribute to DTS test cases, DTS framework.
I would even just say, if you looked at the coverage numbers and even some of the other things that I've kicked around, there's a lot of existing libraries that have no unit test cases at all.
Yep. Yep, I agree.
So since you're mentioning DTS, and you're talking about Raspberry Pi, I don't think we need all the hardware IOs, but at least it would be good to make sure that all the low-end NXPs, all Raspberry Pi would run some, let's say, compiles, run some coverage of DPK, and until some days we'll get some drivers, because there could be some applications that may not need the native IOs, maybe use PCI or other IOs, but at least we need to make sure that it runs, it compiles. I can tell you when you run it big Indian and little Indians, you face some issues with DPDKs when you try both. I mean, that was one of the issues, by the way, with Power 8 at that time, and we still have this issue 10 years later.
Just one comment on Raspberry Pi. So there's already enough in DPDK to run with XDP, and then you plug your DPDK application on it. So we tested this kind of setup. It works for...
I tested the Tune driver on mine.
I'm confident it just means that it's missing some CI. That's what I'm just meaning. So for whatever new patches, new contributions, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
One other project that I have just remembered. As far as I am aware, we still don't have a software fallback for DMA dev, which was advertised as a memcopy accelerator. So probably it's a reasonable project to go in software, use memcopy, memset, etc., to implement a fallback so that those of us who need portability can actually use DMA devs.
Same thing for all the devs like that crypto dev and compressed dev. Any more? I'm looking and I'm not seeing anybody wanting to get up. So, what we'll do then is close this off. We'll publish the list, and we'll take any more submissions afterwards. If you think of something on the plane on the way back, we can add to it.
A Wi-Fi driver?
Good point. Or at least a demo of one. Doesn't have to be for all the Wi-Fi chips in the world. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. It was good to get this started.